At Christmas dinner, my parents set a table for 20 guests but told me and my daughter to eat in the kitchen. I walked out silently. When I discovered they'd stolen my late wife's trust fund, I dismantled the family forever. I'm Damien, I'm 35 years old, and at my family's Christmas dinner, my own mother told me and my 10-year-old daughter that we had to eat in the kitchen, away from the 20 other guests. Before I tell you how that single moment of humiliation led me to uncover a multi-million-dollar betrayal that destroyed the family I once knew, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It all started on Christmas Eve, a night that's supposed to be about family and warmth, but in my family, it was always more of a performance. The air in my parents' sprawling house was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and the sharp, clean smell of the giant Douglas fir dominating their living room. I walked in with my daughter, Valeria, her small hand tucked safely in mine, a comforting weight against the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I was carrying a bottle of wine, an expensive Cabernet I knew my father loved, a silent peace offering in our year-long Cold War, a war I seemed to be the only one fighting. My mother, Letitia, greeted me with a brilliant, brittle smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Damien, so good of you to make it." She took the wine, her eyes flicking to the label for a fraction of a second too long. A subtle but clear sign of approval for the gift, not the giver. "Richard, look what Damien brought. The good stuff." My father, Richard, grunted an acknowledgement from his favorite armchair, his eyes glued to a holiday football game. He looked tired. He always looked tired, a man worn down by a force I was only beginning to understand. As my mother bustled away, I took a moment to scan the room. It was packed. Business associates of my father's, laughing a little too loudly. Neighbors I barely knew, making small talk. Distant cousins I hadn't seen in years. It was a curated audience, designed to project an image of success and familial harmony. It was all a lie, and as my eyes fell on my mother as she spoke to a guest, I saw it. A diamond necklace. It wasn't a subtle little pendant. It was a serious piece of jewelry, a river of ice that glittered aggressively under the chandelier. It was new, and it seemed jarringly loud, especially given how often she'd complained to me on the phone about money being tight lately. I filed the thought away, another small, unsettling detail in a lifetime of them. "It's so pretty, Daddy," Valeria whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the spectacle. The dining room table was a masterpiece, a full 20 settings of their best china, sparkling crystal glasses, and elaborate, gold-inked place cards. It was a show of prosperity, a declaration, and that's when the cold feeling that started in my stomach turned to ice. I guided Valeria closer, my eyes scanning the elegant cursive on the cards. Ryan, Sophie, Uncle Robert, a Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. My eyes scanned the whole length of the table twice, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. There was no card for Damien, and no card for Valeria. In a room full of 20 people, we were the only two who didn't have a place. We didn't exist. I found my mother in the kitchen, a whirlwind of frantic energy. "Mom," I started, keeping my voice low and even, a skill I'd honed over a lifetime of navigating her moods. "I don't see our place cards out there." She didn't turn around, just waved a dismissive hand over a steaming pot of gravy. "Oh, that," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too casual. "It's just so crowded." And I didn't want to mess up the seating arrangement with an uneven number. I was thinking, why don't you and Valeria just eat in here? It's cozier, and she won't be so bored with all the adult talk. My gaze fell on the small, wobbly kitchen table tucked into a corner. It was piled with discarded vegetable peelings and a stack of junk mail. She hadn't even cleared it. We were to eat at the garbage table. The humiliation was a physical thing, hot and sharp, rising in my throat like bile. We weren't just an afterthought. We were an inconvenience to be hidden away. I didn't say a word. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. That's what she wanted, what she knew how to handle. I simply turned, walked back to my daughter, and put my hand gently on her shoulder. "Hey, sweetie, we have to go." Her face fell. "But we haven't eaten yet, Daddy." I know. We'll go get a pizza. Our favorite place. Double pepperoni. I steered her towards the front door, feeling the weight of 20 pairs of curious eyes on my back. I didn't look at my mother or my father or anyone. I just walked out into the biting cold of the winter night, the sound of their fake laughter swallowed by the closing door. In the car, safely buckled into her booster seat, the silence was broken by Valeria's small, trembling voice. "Daddy?" she asked, looking at me with her wide, innocent eyes, her mother's eyes. "Is Grandma mad at us?" And in that moment, the dam of my restraint, built up over 35 years of quiet tolerance, didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't about me anymore. It never should have been. This was about the little girl in my back seat, who was being taught on Christmas that she was worth less than a stranger. This was the end of the line. The 15-minute drive home felt like an eternity. The festive red and green lights of the neighborhood blurred into meaningless streaks of color. Each brightly decorated home we passed was a painful diorama of a life I desperately wanted for my daughter. A life of simple, genuine warmth, not the transactional, conditional affection I grew up with. My mind was a vortex, pulling me back through years of similar, smaller cuts, each one a testament to my place in the family hierarchy. I remembered Ryan's 21st birthday. My parents had thrown him a lavish party, renting out a hall and hiring a band. My gift to him was $1,000 in cash, a significant amount for me at the time as I was just starting my career and paying off student loans. He'd taken the envelope, glanced inside, and tossed it on a table without a word of thanks. Later, my mother pulled me aside, her arm linked through mine, her voice conspiratorial. "That's sweet of you, Damien," she'd said. "But your father and I gave him a new convertible. You should see it, it's cherry red." The unspoken message was clear. Your sacrifice is quaint, but it's insignificant. Then there was the time, years ago, when Lucia was still alive, fighting her first battle with the cancer that would eventually take her. She was frail and pale, but she'd insisted on coming to Sunday dinner, wanting to maintain a sense of normalcy for as long as possible. That was the day my brother Ryan, for the 5th time in as many years, announced he was quitting a stable job to pursue a new venture. This time it was day trading. My parents were practically giddy. "He has the instinct for it," my father had declared, a rare spark of energy in his eyes. "A real killer instinct. You have to risk it to get the biscuit." Later, I was in the kitchen getting Lucia a glass of water when I overheard my mother on the phone with my aunt. "Damien is a good boy," she'd said, her voice laced with a sort of pitying affection that was worse than any insult. "So reliable, a safe choice. He'll always be fine. But Ryan is the one who will make this family a fortune." Lucia, who had followed me into the kitchen, heard it too. She simply reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. She didn't say a word, but her eyes, full of fierce love and indignation on my behalf, told me everything. "I see it. I know. You're not crazy." Her silent support was the only thing that kept me from walking out right then. Now she was gone, and I was alone in the quiet of my own home, the silence amplifying the echo of Valeria's question. "Is Grandma mad at us?" It was an indictment of my passivity. For 3 years since Lucia's death, I had let things slide. I had absorbed the backhanded compliments, funded the endless emergencies, and played the part of the dutiful, boring son because it was easier than starting a war. But tonight, they had turned their casual cruelty on my child. The war had just been declared on my behalf. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The churning anger from the night before had cooled and hardened into a diamond-sharp clarity. I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to send a long, wounded text message that they would pick apart and use against me as proof of my sensitivity. That was their game, a game I now refused to play. I was an architect. I designed structures to stand for 100 years. And I knew that before you can build something new, you have to survey the old, rotten foundation. You have to find every crack, every point of weakness, every compromised beam. My first move was to test the structure. I needed information, and I decided to start with what should have been the path of least resistance. I called Mr. Henderson, the family's accountant for over 30 years. He was a timid man who always seemed to be perspiring, a walking bundle of nerves held together by a cheap suit. "Mr. Henderson, Damien here," I said, my voice deliberately calm and professional. "I hope I'm not disturbing you during the holidays." "Damien." No, not at all, my boy," he said, his voice a little too high, a little too cheerful. "Merry Christmas to you and the little one." "You too. Listen, a quick question. I was just reviewing some of my own finances for the end of the year, and I realized I haven't seen the quarterly P&L statements for the restaurant in a while. Would you mind emailing over the last 2 quarters for me?" A thick, heavy silence stretched over the line. I could hear the faint, wheezing sound of him breathing. He was panicking. The reports?" he stammered, as if I'd asked for classified government secrets. "Well, you see, Damien, the thing is, your mother, she handles the final books herself now. She really likes to keep a close eye on things, you know how she is. I just handle the payroll and the preliminary numbers. The day-to-day stuff." It was such a blatant, clumsy lie. He was the official CPA of record for the corporation. He was legally obligated to maintain and provide those records to any shareholder. His fear was a tangible thing, a rank odor of sweat and deceit coming through the phone. "I see," I said slowly, letting the silence hang between us, letting him stew in it. "So, to be clear, as the company's accountant, you're saying you don't have access to the final profit and loss statements?" Not exactly. I mean, I could probably track them down if I really dig. It's really better if you ask Letitia, Damien. It's just simpler that way, you know. Keeps her happy. Keeps her happy. The family mantra. The justification for 1,000 sins. "All right, Mr. Henderson. Thanks for your time." I hung up the phone, and the first major crack in the foundation appeared. Henderson was scared. He was actively concealing financial documents from a shareholder, at my mother's direction. This wasn't just messy bookkeeping. This was a cover-up. My hands were trembling with a mixture of fear and vindication. I needed to talk to someone who was on my side, someone outside the family's gravitational pull. I called Elena, Lucia's best friend, a sharp, fiercely loyal woman who had become a surrogate aunt to Valeria and my last remaining link to Lucia's clarity. I told her everything, the words tumbling out of me. The kitchen, the necklace, the chilling call with Henderson. She listened, as she always did, without interruption, letting me purge the poison. "Good," she said finally when I was done. "Good? Elena, it's a disaster." "It's a good disaster," she corrected me, her voice firm as steel. "It's the one you needed. Damien, listen to me. Lucia told me something a few months before she passed. We were talking about the future, about you and Valeria. She said, 'My biggest fear is that after I'm gone, they'll use Damien's good heart to bleed him dry. He'll do anything to keep the peace, and they know it.' She saw this coming, honey. She saw how they used your sense of duty against you. Don't you dare let them do that to her daughter. You fight. You burn it all down if you have to. Burn it all down," I whispered. The phrase didn't seem so scary anymore. It sounded like justice. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. My sister, Sophie, the family's designated diplomat, the one who smoothed things over, the one who applied the emotional bandages to keep the wounded soldiers in line. "Hi," she began, her voice a warm, syrupy concoction of concern. "I just spoke to Mom. She's an absolute wreck. She said you just stormed out without a word. You really hurt her feelings. She was just trying to give you and Valeria a quiet space away from all the noise." The lie was so audacious, so insulting to my intelligence, that a bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. This was the script. For years I had played my part. I would feel a pang of guilt, I would apologize, and the toxic cycle would reset. "Sophie?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Was I supposed to say thank you for being told to eat at the garbage table?" "Well, no, of course not. But you could have been more understanding. You know how stressed she gets hosting during the holidays. It was a full house. She had a lot on her mind. Can't you just call her? Apologize and smooth things over? For the sake of the family. For the sake of the family. The magical incantation that made all sins disappear. I have to go, Sophie, I said, my voice final. I hung up before she could reply. I sat in my office for a long time, the pieces clicking into place. Henderson was hiding the books. Sophie was running interference. My parents were at the center of the rot. Elena was right. It was time. I looked up the number for a man Lucia had insisted I keep in my contacts. A lawyer she'd used for her own estate planning. He's a bulldog in a tailored suit, she told me. He doesn't care about feelings. He cares about facts. You might need him one day. His name was Arthur Davenport. The next day, I was sitting across from him. His office was a fortress of quiet power. Dark wood, old leather, and the faint, pleasant smell of paper and lemon polish. Davenport himself was in his late 60s, with eyes so sharp and intelligent they seemed to be assessing the structural integrity of my soul. I told him everything. The years of propping up Ryan. The dismissal of my own life. The incident at Christmas. The damning phone call with the family accountant. I laid out the blueprints of my family's dysfunction, not as a wounded son, but as a client stating a case. He listened, his hands steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt once. When I was finished, he was silent for a full minute, his gaze steady on mine. Damien, he finally said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Family businesses are often emotionally complicated. But what you're describing, a CPA's outright refusal to provide financial records to a part owner, a documented history of unrepaid, six-figure loans to one sibling, and active attempts by another to manage your emotional response. This suggests more than just complication. This suggests a concerted, multi-pronged effort to hide something. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Based on what you've told me, a polite request for information will be met with more lies and manipulation. The only way to get a true picture of the company's health and your own financial exposure is with a full, independent, forensic audit. It's the only tool that gets us answers they can't lie, manipulate, or cry their way out of. The word forensic landed with a heavy thud in the quiet office. It was a word for crime scenes. A word for when things were broken beyond repair. That's what my family felt like now. Broken beyond repair. Do it, I said, my voice clear and steady, with a resolve that surprised even me. Do whatever it takes. Davenport gave a slow, grim nod of approval. All right, Damien. The die is cast. I walked out of that office into the crisp winter air. The sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. The anger and hurt had receded, replaced by a cold, calm sense of purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to my family's chaos. I was acting. The architect was finally drawing his own plans. The plan Mr. Davenport and I devised was a two-pronged attack, designed to dismantle their defenses both legally and psychologically. The first prong was the official declaration of war. Davenport drafted and sent a formal, ironclad letter via registered mail to my parents and the restaurant's corporate entity. It was impeccably polite and utterly inescapable, informing them that as a significant shareholder, I had engaged the firm of Gable and Associates to conduct a full forensic audit of the company's books, effective immediately. There was no ambiguity. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. The second prong was more subtle. It was a psychological hand grenade, rolled quietly into their bunker to see who would panic first. A few days after they would have received the official letter, I pulled out my phone and sent a carefully worded text message to my sister, Sophie. Hey Soph, just a heads up. My financial advisor is strongly recommending I move most of my investment portfolio overseas to diversify before the end of the fiscal year. Just letting you know since some of that is still tied up in the old family accounts. It probably won't affect anything on your end, but I wanted to be transparent. It was a complete fabrication. But I knew my sister. She was the family's central nervous system, the conduit for all information and panic. That text wasn't just a text. It was a lit match tossed into a room I knew was filled with gasoline. I pictured her reading it, her eyes widening in horror. The idea of my money, their emergency fund, their eternal safety net, becoming inaccessible and, more importantly, untrackable would send them into a spiral. The response was even faster than I'd anticipated. My phone didn't just ring, it exploded. The first call was my mother, her name flashing on the screen with an angry urgency. I looked at it, took a calm sip of my coffee, and let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my father's number appeared. I ignored that one, too. Then came a frantic text from Sophie. "Call me right now, Damien, it's an emergency." Followed by another call from her. I let it ring until it stopped. I felt a grim satisfaction. Every missed call, every frantic text was a data point. Their panic was confirmation. It told me, louder than any confession, that there was something in those books they were terrified of me finding. And they were even more terrified that the money to cover it up was about to disappear. I let them stew in their self-inflicted anxiety for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, the audit began. Davenport had hired the best. A man named Mr. Gable, a forensic accountant with a quiet, unassuming demeanor that masked a relentless, bloodhound-like mind. Gable set up a temporary office in a small, dusty storage room at the back of the restaurant, a space usually reserved for old menus and broken chairs. The symbolism was not lost on me. They were treating this audit like garbage to be hidden away. The resistance, as expected, was immediate and childish. The restaurant manager, a man named Marcus who owed his career to my brother, played the part of loyal soldier with gusto. The first day, Gable called me. "Damien, they're claiming the key to the main filing cabinet is missing. The one with vendor invoices from the last 3 years." "I'll handle it," I said. I drove to the restaurant. The lunchtime crowd was thinning. The staff looked at me with nervous, curious eyes. I walked straight back to the manager's office. Marcus was there, looking smug. "Marcus," I said, my voice low and calm, "Mr. Gable needs the key to the filing cabinet." Like I told him, "Damien, it's gone missing. We've looked everywhere. A real mystery." I leaned forward, placing my hands on his desk. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 5 minutes to stop having a memory problem and find that key. If you can't, Mr. Gable will be back here this afternoon with a court order and a man with a very large drill. And I will make a note in the corporate minutes that you actively obstructed a shareholder investigation. Your choice." The smug look vanished. He swallowed hard. Let me check one more place." 5 minutes later, the key magically appeared. But the games continued. The next day it was, the server with all the sales data from 2022? A real shame that we had a power surge and it just crashed. Total loss. The IT guys said it was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. Gable, to his credit, never lost his cool. He just called me, his voice flat. "They're claiming a server crash, Damien. Get the court order," I said. "For everything. Full access. No more games." While the legal gears turned, the calls from my family became more desperate and manipulative. Sophie left a tearful voicemail that sounded like a masterclass in emotional blackmail. "Damien, I don't know what's gotten into you. Mom is beside herself. She's barely sleeping. She thinks you're trying to destroy the family your grandfather built. And Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor is really worried about him. He had to lie down all afternoon. Is this really worth giving your father a heart attack over? Can you please just call off these lawyers? This isn't you. We can talk this out. Like we always do. Like we always do." The words sent a chill down my spine. Like we always do meant I would absorb the blame, feel the guilt, and back down to restore a false peace. It meant I would apologize for their wrongdoing. That Damien was gone. He'd walked out of their house on Christmas Eve and had never come back. The court order, when it arrived, was a thing of beauty. It wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by the full weight of the judicial system. A deputy sheriff served it to Marcus personally during the lunch rush. I was told the color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. Suddenly, miracles started to happen. The crashed server turned out to have a miraculous cloud backup that the IT guy had forgotten about. Mr. Gable was granted full, unrestricted access to every document, digital and physical, for the last 5 years. The stone wall had crumbled. For a week, there was an eerie silence from my family. They knew the jig was up. Gable worked 16-hour days, fueled by black coffee and a quiet professional fury. I saw him once during that week when I dropped off some documents. He was in the storage room, surrounded by teetering stacks of bankers' boxes, the screen of his laptop glowing in the dim light, filled with endless columns of numbers. The air smelled of old paper and dust. He looked up at me, his eyes tired but sharp. "They weren't just sloppy," he said, his voice a low murmur. "They were arrogant. They thought no one would ever look. That's how we always get them." The call that I had been waiting for, and dreading, came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Gable. "Damien, it's Gable," he said. There was no preamble. "I think you should come down to my office." "Not the restaurant. My main office." His voice was completely flat, stripped of all emotion, and that scared me more than any shouted warning could have. "I'm on my way," I said. I drove to the anonymous office building downtown, my heart pounding a heavy, unsteady rhythm against my ribs. I walked into the conference room, and Gable was standing in front of a large screen. He had a spreadsheet projected onto it, a dizzying grid of dates, names, and numbers. He gestured for me to sit. "I started where you asked," he said, pointing his pen at a section of the spreadsheet. "Ryan's corporate expense account for the last 3 years. And this," he pointed to another section, "is the restaurant's petty cash log and vendor payment records." He walked me through it, his voice a calm, factual drone that made the information even more horrifying. There were business dinners at high-end steakhouses for thousands of dollars on nights the restaurant was closed. There were consulting fees paid out to a series of shell companies, LLCs that Gable's team had traced back to online gambling sites based in Costa Rica and Cyprus. There were inflated invoices from food and liquor suppliers, with the difference almost certainly kicked back to Ryan in cash. And then there was the simplest, most brazen theft of all. Regular, substantial cash withdrawals, thousands at a time, listed as vendor payments to companies that didn't exist. It was a slow, methodical, arrogant gutting of the company my grandfather had built, the company I had invested my own money in, the company that was supposed to be a part of Valeria's future. "What's the total?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "The bottom line." Gable used his mouse and clicked a single cell on the spreadsheet. A number appeared at the bottom, in bold, unforgiving text. "As far as I can document with an unbreakable paper trail," he said, "your brother has embezzled $1,842,000 over the last 36 months. $1.8 million. I physically sank back into my chair. The air knocked from my lungs. I had expected it to be bad. Maybe a few $100,000. A number that would make me furious, but a number I could wrap my head around. This was different. This was a figure so vast it felt abstract, unreal. It was a betrayal on an industrial scale. He hadn't just been skimming from the till. He had attached a pipeline to the company's main artery and had been draining it dry to fuel his degenerate lifestyle. "And Damien," Gable said, his quiet voice pulling me back from the dizzying shock, "I'm afraid that's not the worst of it." My head snapped up. I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What?" I whispered. "What in God's name could be worse than that?" He brought up another document on the screen. It was a loan agreement, professionally formatted, but the lender's name, Titan Financial Solutions, sounded less like a bank and more like something from a gangster movie. The principal amount of the loan made my vision swim. $3 million. Ryan took out a $3 million loan against the business 2 years ago, Gable explained, his voice grim. He used the restaurant property itself as collateral. The interest rate is predatory, 15% with severe penalties for late payments. And according to their records, he's already missed 2 payments. I stared at the signature line for the borrower. It was my father's name, Richard, but the signature itself, it was just a little too perfect, a little too clean. It lacked the weary, slightly shaky quality of my father's actual handwriting. It was the signature of a man trying to copy another man's name. "That's not my father's signature," I whispered, a cold certainty washing over me. Gable nodded grimly. I didn't think so. It's a good forgery, but it's a forgery nonetheless. We had a handwriting expert take a preliminary look. He's confident. Damien, if they default on this loan, Titan Financial will seize the property. Everything. The building, the business, all of it. And your father, as the person whose name is on the document, could be held liable for bank fraud. I just stared at the screen. The embezzlement was a betrayal of trust. This was a catastrophe. My brother hadn't just stolen from us. He had placed a ticking time bomb under the entire foundation of our family. An explosive powerful enough to vaporize everything, and the fuse was already burning. I thought back to the Christmas dinner, to my mother telling me to eat in the kitchen while wearing a new diamond necklace. They had humiliated me and my daughter while they were actively covering up a multimillion-dollar fraud that was about to make them lose everything. The sheer, staggering hypocrisy of it all left me breathless. I left Gable's office in a daze. The numbers were like ghosts, haunting the passenger seat of my car as I drove through the city. 1.8 million in theft. 3 million in fraudulent debt. My anger had cooled into something else. Something heavier and colder. Dread. This was so much bigger than I had imagined. Ryan wasn't just a leech. He was a black hole actively pulling the entire family into financial ruin, and it was clear my parents were enabling him, or at the very least, willfully blind to the scale of it. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in my home office until 3 a.m. The audit report spread across my desk like a general's battle plan. My eyes kept going back to one detail. The date on the $3 million loan agreement. October 14th, 2 years ago. October 14th. Why did that date tickle the back of my memory? I pulled out my phone and, on a morbid whim, scrolled through my sister Sophie's Instagram feed, going back 2 years. Felt like archaeology, digging through layers of filtered happiness. And then I saw it. A picture from a family dinner at a fancy restaurant. My mother was the center of the photo, beaming, wearing the very same diamond necklace I had seen on her on Christmas Eve. The caption Sophie wrote read, "Celebrating Ryan's big win. So proud of my brother for closing a huge deal. Onwards and upwards. Hashtag family, hashtag success, hashtag proud. A huge deal. A big win." It all clicked into place with a sickening, gut-wrenching clarity. The $3 million loan wasn't for the business. It was the deal. It was a massive cash infusion that they had celebrated as a success. They had lied to everyone, probably even to themselves, about where the money came from. And my mother had rewarded herself with a diamond necklace bought with the proceeds of a crime. A wave of nausea washed over me. I needed to know more. I needed to understand everything. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Where did all that money go? Even with Ryan's gambling, it was a staggering amount. I remembered Gable's report mentioning a large, unexplained cash payment made from the business accounts around that same time, shortly after the loan was funded. It was listed simply as debt repayment. But a repayment for what? Driven by a desperate need for answers, I started digging through my own records, through old bank statements and the boxes of paperwork I had stored in my closet after Lucia passed away. Most of it was just mundane household stuff, old utility bills, car maintenance records. But then I found a heavy accordion folder, neatly labeled by Lucia's precise hand, Valeria's Trust. Lucia had been so proud of this. It was an inheritance from her own grandmother, combined with a life insurance policy she had taken out on herself. "This is for Valeria, Damien," she had told me, her voice weak but firm from her hospital bed, her hand gripping mine. "For her education, for her future, for her wedding if she wants one, for a down payment on a house. It's her start. It's my gift to her when I can't be there. You have to promise me you'll protect it. No matter what." I had promised. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were the trust documents and the annual statements from the bank, sent like clockwork every September. I scanned them, my eyes tracing the steady, healthy growth of the fund over the years. It was always a comfort, a testament to Lucia's love and foresight. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. All normal. And then I saw the statement for the year the loan was taken. Dated September, 2 years ago. I scanned the summary page. My eyes caught on a single line under the withdrawals column. It was a number so large, so out of place, that my brain initially refused to process it. $1.5 million. I stared at the number, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. A withdrawal from a protected trust fund for a minor. It shouldn't have been possible. I flipped through the original trust documents, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the print. The rules were ironclad. Funds could only be withdrawn with the notarized signatures of both trustees. I was one trustee. The other was my mother, Letitia. Lucia, in a gesture of family unity she would come to regret, had made my mother a co-trustee. A gesture of trust. A gesture my mother had apparently spat on. The pieces slammed together so hard it felt like a physical impact. The $3 million loan. The mysterious debt repayment. The $1.5 million withdrawal from my daughter's future. They hadn't just been covering for Ryan. They had been actively participating. They had seen him drowning in debt, probably gambling debt to someone dangerous like Titan Financial, and instead of making him face the consequences, they had stolen from their own granddaughter to bail him out. They had stolen from my dead wife's legacy. I stumbled to the bathroom and retched, my body convulsing with a grief and rage so intense it was a physical weight. This was the dark heart of it all. The fraud, the embezzlement, that was business. This was personal. This was a violation of the most sacred trust imaginable. My promise to Lucia echoed in my ears. Promise me you'll protect it. And I had failed. I had been so busy trying to keep the peace, trying to be the good son, that I hadn't even thought to check. I had trusted them. The grief and rage were so overwhelming, it was a physical weight. But beneath it, something new was being forged. The dread was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was a core of pure, unadulterated ice. I picked up my phone and called Elena. My voice was calm, almost robotic. Elena, I said, the trust fund Lucia set up. Do you remember the name of the bank and the account manager? Of course, honey. It's First National Bank. The manager was a Mr. Peters. Damien, what's wrong? You sound strange. I'm fine, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I just need to check something. The next morning, I didn't just call Mr. Davenport. I was at his office at 8 a.m., waiting for him. When he arrived, I didn't even say hello. I handed him the trust statement, my finger pointing at the withdrawal. Arthur, I said, my voice as cold as steel. I need you to get every single piece of paper associated with this transaction. I want the withdrawal slip. I want to know who signed, where the money went, and I want it yesterday. He looked from the paper to my face, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw a flicker of genuine shock in the old lawyer's eyes. He knew in that moment that we had crossed a new line. The war over a family business was over. A different, much more brutal war was about to begin. The week leading up to the meeting was the longest of my life. Mr. Davenport's office worked with the chilling efficiency of a military operation. They obtained the withdrawal slip from the bank's archives. There they were, in stark black and white, captured on a high-resolution scan. 2 signatures. My mother's, a confident, flamboyant scrawl, and my father's weaker, more hesitant, but undeniably his. They had done it together. The wire transfer instructions were on the same page. The money had been sent directly to an account held by Titan Financial Solutions. It was the debt repayment. They had used my daughter's college fund to service the debt on a fraudulent loan taken out to cover my brother's gambling losses. The neat, tidy, sickening circle of betrayal was complete. Davenport advised me to wait, to gather everything, and to confront them all at once. In a controlled environment. Don't give them time to coordinate their stories, he'd said. We hit them with everything at once. We control the narrative. So I waited. I went to work, designing buildings of glass and steel, marvels of logic and order, while my own personal life was a demolition site. I picked Valeria up from school. I helped her with her homework. I read her bedtime stories, my voice calm while a storm raged inside me. I was living a double life. On the outside, I was Dad. On the inside, I was a general planning the final, decisive battle of a war they didn't even know they had already lost. I had Davenport schedule the meeting at his firm's main conference room. The location was strategic. This was not a family discussion in a living room where they could use emotion and history as a weapon. This was a legal proceeding on neutral ground, my ground. I had my assistant call them, telling them only that my lawyer needed to discuss the audit's findings with all shareholders present. They arrived together, my parents, Ryan and Sophie, a united front. They walked in with an air of defiant arrogance, a collective posture of indignation. My mother's lips were a thin, hard line, her eyes scanning the opulent room with suspicion. My father avoided my gaze, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen him. Ryan swaggered in, a cheap suit doing little to hide his weakness, trying to project an aura of someone who was untouchable. And Sophie wore a mask of pained concern, the dutiful daughter tragically caught in the middle of her brother's terrible misunderstanding. They saw Mr. Davenport sitting at the head of a long, polished mahogany table, and their confidence wavered for a split second. A man in a three-piece suit meant things were serious. They sat down opposite me. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. "Thank you for coming," Davenport began, his voice calm and authoritative, filling the room. "We are here to discuss the results of the forensic audit of the family corporation, an audit which, as a significant shareholder, my client was well within his rights to request." He didn't waste any time. He motioned to his paralegal, who put the first report on the large screen at the end of the room. It was Gable's summary of the embezzlement. $1.8 million broken down by category. Fraudulent expenses, shell company payments, straight cash withdrawals. Ryan actually scoffed, a short, barking laugh. "This is ridiculous. This creative accounting. Every business does it to save on taxes. My brother is just too uptight to understand how the real world works. Is paying for your online poker habit in Cyprus with a corporate card creative accounting, Ryan?" I asked, my voice flat, emotionless. His face went pale, the smirk vanishing. "I don't know what you're talking about. Those were consultants." My mother jumped in, her voice rising, shrill and protective. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you, you hire these vultures to spy on your own brother? To twist things? This is a witch hunt." Davenport ignored her completely and put the next document on the screen. The $3 million loan agreement from Titan Financial. "We also found this," he said. "A $3 million loan, secured by the business property. The signatures required were that of the company president, Richard, and the CEO, Letitia." He paused, letting the weight of the document sink in. "The problem is, our experts are confident the signature for Richard is a forgery." The room went dead silent. My father sank lower in his chair, his face ashen, looking at his hands on the table as if they had betrayed him. Ryan stared at the screen, his swagger completely gone, replaced by a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. "It's a lie," Ryan blurted out, his voice cracking, desperate. "Dad signed it. He was there. Tell him, Dad." He looked at my father, pleading. I turned my gaze to my father. "Dad, did you sign a $3 million loan agreement with a predatory lender 2 years ago?" He just shook his head, a tiny, pathetic movement, his eyes still fixed on the table, unable to speak. And then my mother found her voice again, no longer just defensive, but full of a righteous, narcissistic rage. "What does it matter if he signed it or not? It was for the family. Ryan had an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We had to support him. You, Damien," she said, pointing a finger at me. "You were never a risk-taker, always so safe, so boring. You wouldn't understand what it takes to get ahead in this world. Sometimes you have to bend the rules." The justification, the attack, it was all textbook. I had expected it. I let her finish, her voice echoing in the silent, wood-paneled room. "An opportunity," I repeated softly, letting the word hang in the air. "Was it also an opportunity when you couldn't make the payments to Titan Financial?" When the loan sharks, because let's call them what they are, came calling for their money. We handled it, she snapped, her chin jutting out defiantly. Family looks after its own. Something you've clearly forgotten. Yes? I said, my voice dropping, becoming dangerously quiet. You did handle it. I nodded to Davenport. He put the final document on the screen. It was the bank statement from Valeria's trust fund. The $1.5 million withdrawal was highlighted in a sickening, blood-red color. You handled it with this, I said. The air was sucked out of the room. Sophie gasped, a strangled sound, her hand flying to her mouth as she finally understood. Ryan looked like he had been physically punched in the stomach, all the air leaving his body in a silent wheeze. My mother stared at the screen, her face a mask of pure disbelief. Not that she had been caught, but that I had been capable of finding it. You're right, Mom, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Family looks after its own. So you took my daughter's college fund? The money her mother left for her from her deathbed? The money I promised her I would protect. And you used it to pay off the debts of a loan your other son took out by forging his own father's name. Is that about the size of it? For a single solitary second, there was absolute ringing silence. The truth was there, naked and ugly and undeniable, hanging in the air for all of them to see. And then the implosion began. We had no choice, my mother shrieked, her composure finally shattering into a million pieces. They were going to hurt him. Those men were going to hurt Ryan. What were we supposed to do? Let them? Would you have preferred that, Damien? To see your brother in a ditch somewhere? She turned on my father, her face contorted with fury. This is your fault. You were always too weak. You never taught him how to be a man. You let him get into this mess. Me? My father finally choked out, looking up, his eyes glassy with a lifetime of repressed bitterness. You were the one who always gave him everything he wanted. He was your golden boy. My opinion never mattered. He could do no wrong in your eyes. Don't you dare blame me for your failings as a father, she screamed back. Ryan, seeing the walls closing in, the two people who were supposed to protect him now devouring each other, turned his panicked eyes to me. He pointed a shaking finger. This is because of you. You were always jealous of me. You could never stand to see me succeed. You dug all this up just to ruin me. They were unraveling, turning on each other like a pack of wolves. The ugly, rotten core of their relationships laid bare under the fluorescent lights of the conference room. Sophie was openly weeping, her head in her hands. I just sat there watching them. The architect in me observed the catastrophic structural failure. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, bottomless pity. I had come here for a reckoning, and what I found were just broken, selfish people, trapped in a collapsing cage of their own making. I looked at Davenport. He gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was time to end it. I let the chaos swirl for another moment, letting them fully expose themselves in their panic and blame. The shouting, the crying, the pathetic deflections. It was the death rattle of the family unit I had once known. Finally, I held up a hand. The gesture was small, but my silence had become a source of power in the room, and they fell quiet, their chests heaving, their angry, tear-streaked faces turned towards me. Enough, I said. The word was not loud, but it cut through the noise with the sharpness of glass. Your feelings are irrelevant now. Your justifications are irrelevant. What matters are the facts and the consequences. I stood up and walked to the head of the table, standing beside Mr. Davenport. I was no longer the son or the brother in the room. I was the opposing counsel. I was the man in charge. Here are the facts, I continued, my eyes moving from my mother's face, now pale with shock, to my father's broken gaze, to Ryan's terrified, darting eyes. Fact 1, Ryan, you have systematically embezzled over $1.8 million from the company. That's a felony called grand larceny. Fact 2, you forged our father's signature on a $3 million loan document from what is, for all intents and purposes, an organized crime lender. That is bank fraud and forgery, also felonies. Fact 3. Mom and Dad, I said, my voice hardening as I looked at them directly. You knowingly and willfully withdrew $1.5 million from a legally protected trust fund established for a minor. That is a criminal breach of fiduciary duty, and it is theft. Grand theft. I let the words hang in the air, each one a nail in the coffin of their denial. These are not family squabbles to be smoothed over, Sophie, I said, looking at my sister for the first time as she looked up, her face a mess. These are crimes, and crimes have consequences. Mr. Davenport cleared his throat and took over, his voice the epitome of legal gravitas, cold and final. Here is what is going to happen, he said, and the way he said it made it clear that this was a verdict, not a negotiation. First, the loan from Titan Financial will be paid in full. Immediately, to generate the necessary capital, you will be putting 2 assets on the market by the end of this business week. The family home and the restaurant, including the building and the land it sits on. My mother let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure agony. No, not the house. Your grandfather built that house with his own 2 hands. My grandfather didn't steal from his own granddaughter to pay a loan shark's vig, I said, my voice like ice. The memory of him was the only thing I still respected, and they had tarnished that too. His legacy is not your shield. Second, Davenport continued, unfazed, the $1.5 million will be returned to Valeria's trust fund. You will also reimburse the trust for the interest it would have accrued over the past 2 years, and you will cover all legal and accounting fees incurred by Mr. Damien during this investigation. My office will oversee all transactions. He looked pointedly at my parents. You will also be signing documents today, immediately relinquishing your roles as trustees. I will be petitioning the court to appoint me as co-trustee, alongside Damien. Third, he said, turning his gaze to Ryan, who seemed to shrink in his chair until he was half his normal size. You will sign a legally binding confession, detailing the embezzlement and the forgery. A payment plan will be structured, garnishing your wages for the foreseeable future to begin repaying what you stole. We are not, at this time, turning these files over to the district attorney. This is not because you deserve such leniency, but because my client does not wish for his daughter's last name to be dragged through a public criminal trial. It was a sliver of mercy, and it was for Valeria's sake alone. Davenport slid a thick stack of papers across the polished mahogany table. These are the brokerage agreements for the sale of the real estate, the documents relinquishing your trusteeship, and Ryan's confession. You will sign them now. For a moment, nobody moved. It was the final silent stand. I could see the defiance flickering in my mother's eyes, one last spark of her lifelong belief that she could control any situation. And if we don't? She whispered, her voice venomous. Davenport leaned back in his chair, his expression almost bored. Then this meeting is over. You can walk out that door, and I will walk these files, including the sworn affidavits from Mr. Gable and the handwriting expert, over to the district attorney's office. I'm sure they'll find it very interesting. The choice is yours. A quiet, humiliating financial restructuring, or a very public, life-destroying criminal investigation that will send at least 2 of you to prison. The threat hung in the air, absolute and inescapable. My father was the first to break. With a trembling hand that looked ancient, he reached for a pen. He didn't even read the documents. He just started signing where the little yellow tabs indicated. His shoulders slumped in the final, crushing posture of defeat. One by one, they all signed. Ryan's signature was a barely legible scrawl, his hand shaking so badly he could hardly hold the pen. My mother signed last, her movements stiff and jerky with repressed rage. When she was done, she threw the pen down on the table, the plastic clattering loudly in the silent room. The business was finished. Davenport gathered the signed papers, tapping them into a neat stack. My paralegal will show you out. My parents and Ryan filed out of the room like ghosts, their faces gray and empty. They didn't look at me. It was as if I was already a ghost to them. Sophie lingered for a moment, hesitating at the door. Her face was a wreck of tears and smudged makeup. "Damien," she began, her voice a pathetic plea. I'm so sorry. I didn't know all of it. I never would have. I just wanted to keep the family together. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want the excuses or the apologies. It was too late. The family she wanted to keep together was a lie." I simply looked at her, my face a blank mask, then reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out one of Mr. Davenport's business cards. I held it out to her. "From now on, Sophie," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion, "any and all communication will go through him." Her face crumbled as she finally understood the totality of the severance. She took the card, her fingers brushing mine for a half-second, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just nothing, an absolute void. She turned and walked out of the room without another word. I stood there alone in the silent conference room, the signed papers sitting on the table like a peace treaty at the end of a long and bloody war. It was over. The power had shifted. The rotten foundation had been demolished. And from the rubble I could finally start to build something new. The year that followed was one of profound, deafening silence from them. And it was the most peaceful year of my life. The house and the restaurant were sold in a matter of months. Davenport's firm handled everything with ruthless, impersonal efficiency. I saw the pictures on a real estate website. The empty rooms of the house I grew up in, stripped of all their warmth and memories, looking sterile and sad. I felt a brief pang of something, not nostalgia, but a strange sense of loss for the idea of a home, for what could have been, for the family I wished I'd had. Then the feeling passed. It was just a building. For me, that house had been a place of obligation and quiet misery, a stage for a long-running play where I was always miscast. The sale was a liberation. The proceeds from the sales were enough to pay off the Titan financial loan in full, ending that threat forever. And, as promised, every single cent of the $1.5 million was deposited back into Valeria's trust fund. When I received the new statement, with the balance restored to its rightful place, and with my name and Arthur Davenport's as the sole trustees, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it was like taking my first deep breath after nearly drowning. I had kept my promise to Lucia. I had fixed my greatest failure. I held to my word. I blocked their numbers. I marked their emails as spam. I instructed Davenport's office to be a firewall. Any attempts at communication were to be logged and filed, but not sent to me unless legally necessary. My old family ceased to exist in my daily life. What little I knew of them came in trickles, through the detached filter of my lawyer during our quarterly calls. My parents had moved into a small condo 2 states away, a drastic downsizing that I knew must be killing my mother's pride. My father's health, Davenport mentioned offhandedly, was reportedly failing. My mother had not taken the loss of her social status or her power over her children well. And Ryan, stripped of his safety net, was reportedly working a menial job at a big box store, his wages garnished by the legally binding agreement he had signed. He was a ghost in a blue vest, paying a debt he could never truly repay. Sophie had tried to reach out a few times, sending long, rambling emails to Davenport that he would forward to me without comment, as per my instructions. I read the first one. It was a torrent of self-pity, excuses, and justifications, all wrapped in the language of apology. "I was just trying to keep the peace," she wrote. "I didn't want to see everyone hurting." I deleted it without replying. My life, and more importantly, Valeria's life, began to flourish in the newfound quiet. Without the constant, low-level stress of my family's drama, my mind was clear. My work as an architect took on a new energy and creativity. I won a major contract to design a new community arts center, a project full of light and hope and public purpose that felt deeply symbolic. I poured myself into it, working with a passion I hadn't felt in years. Valeria blossomed. I had worried that the fallout, the sudden absence of her grandparents and aunt and uncle, would scar her. But kids are resilient, and they are deeply attuned to the happiness of their parents. All she knew was that she didn't have to go to Grandma's house anymore, and that her dad was happier, more present, and smiled more. He wasn't walking on eggshells. He wasn't tense after every phone call. We took weekend trips, just the two of us. We went hiking in the mountains and skipped stones across lakes. We spent a week at the beach, not a fancy resort, just a small cottage where we built elaborate sandcastles until the sun went down. I was rebuilding our own small family, a family of two, on a new foundation of trust, laughter, and peace. I showed her through my actions what a family was supposed to feel like, safe. One afternoon, about a year after the confrontation, I sat down with my own financial advisor. I took a significant portion of my own savings and established a second, brand new trust fund for Valeria. Clean one. One that had no history, no ghosts attached to it. The paperwork was fresh, the account number new. It was my legacy to her, a symbol that our future would not be defined or tainted by the betrayals of the past. As I signed the documents, I felt a sense of closure so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I was creating a new story for us, one I would write myself. A week later, a thick envelope arrived at my office. It was forwarded from Davenport's firm. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Sophie. I almost threw it away, but my curiosity got the better of me. This letter was different from the emails. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. "Dear Damien," it began, "I know you don't want to hear from me, and I don't expect you to reply. I'm not writing this for you. I'm writing it for me. I need to tell the whole truth, just once, to someone who will understand it." My heart rate picked up. I kept reading. "I knew," she wrote. "I didn't know the details about the loan from those thugs, but I knew about the money from Valeria's trust. I overheard Mom and Dad arguing about it late one night, months before you found out. It was a terrible fight. Dad was crying. I heard him call it grave robbing. He said Lucia would haunt him. Mom was screaming at him, telling him it was his fault for not being a stronger father, for letting Ryan get into so much trouble. She said it was his duty to protect his son, no matter the cost. She can make you believe anything, you know. She can make black seem white." The phrase grave robbing sent a chill down my spine. So my father did have a conscience. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was just too weak to stand up to her. The letter continued. "I kept quiet, for months. I told myself it was to protect the family from blowing up. But that's a lie I told myself. The real truth, the ugly truth, is that I was jealous of you. You had escaped. You had Lucia, and then you had Valeria, and you had a life that wasn't smothered by them every single day. I was still stuck there in the middle of their toxicity. And I was afraid. I was terrified that if the family blew up, I would have nothing and nowhere to go. So I helped them manage you. I passed on the messages. I laid on the guilt, because it was easier than facing the truth. I knew what they did was wrong, and I chose to be a part of it. I'm so sorry, Damien. Not because I want your forgiveness, but because you deserve to know you weren't crazy. You were the only sane one in the asylum. I hope you and Valeria are happy. You've earned it." I folded the letter and put it away. It didn't change anything, but it confirmed everything. It was the final, sad postscript on a story of weakness, narcissism, and decay. It solidified my decision, my choice to walk away, as the single best, healthiest thing I had ever done for myself and for my daughter. I had broken the cycle. A few weeks ago, on a bright Saturday afternoon, I took Valeria to the park. She's 11 now, on the cusp of becoming a teenager, full of a sharp wit and a deep, easy laugh that's the best sound in the world. I was sitting on a bench, watching her on the swings, flying higher and higher, her long brown hair streaming out behind her, her face alight with pure, uncomplicated joy. The sunlight was warm on my face. The sound of kids laughing and shouting filled the air. And as I watched my daughter, so full of life and potential, I thought about the word family. For most of my life, I thought it meant blood. It meant obligation, duty, a debt you could never repay. I thought it was something you were stuck with, for better or for worse. In my case, for 35 years, it was for worse. I see now that I was wrong. Family isn't about blood. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about protection. It's a safe harbor in a storm, not the storm itself. My parents, my brother, my sister, they were my relatives. They were a collection of people bound by genetics and a shared, toxic history. But they were not my family. My family was the brilliant, strong woman who had loved me enough to plan for a future she wouldn't get to see. My family was her best friend, who reminded me of my own strength when I had forgotten it. My family was the old, bulldog lawyer who saw an injustice and fought for me. And most of all, my family is the incredible little girl on that swing set, the one who deserves a world of safety and opportunity, free from the shadows of the past. I didn't destroy a family. There was no family left to destroy. I just performed a controlled demolition on a rotten structure before it collapsed and crushed the only person who mattered. I cleared the ground. And now, in the quiet, peaceful space I created, Valeria and I are building our own legacy. It won't be a legacy of houses or businesses or flashy diamond necklaces. It will be a legacy of integrity, of peace, of laughter, and of the quiet, unshakable strength it takes to walk away from what is broken and build something beautiful and new. And as I watched Valeria swing towards the bright blue sky, free and fearless, I knew, deep in my bones, that it was a legacy Lucia would have been proud of. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make an impossible choice for the sake of your own peace or for someone you love? Share your story in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.